Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Digital Leader Show, where we talk key issues and news at the intersection of business and technology in hopes of making you a better digital leader. Hosted by Dan Goodstein and URPA AI, a professional association, media and peer research network, providing education, networking and advice to over 130,000 global members on automation, enterprise AI, and digital transformation. We're live Wednesdays at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific on LinkedIn and YouTube, and the audio recording is available wherever you get your podcasts. And now, here's your host, Dan Goodstein.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Digital Leader Show. Today, we're discussing 2025 recap and predictions for 2026, plus headlines for digital leaders. My co-host today is Chris Cerdak, URPA AI Senior Analyst, award-winning author, and former White House Chief Transformation Office Advisor, partner for digital transformation at Gartner, and AI practice lead at EY. Chris, good afternoon.
How are you, my friend? Can't believe the year's over.
We made it.
More or less.
Kicking and screaming. Still have jobs, but it was a year, man.
It was, yeah. It's been crazy. We'll see how it wraps up. But
yeah, it's last show for us for the year. We want to talk about what we expected to happen this year, what happened, what didn't happen, and what we're seeing for next year. So if you're like, well, it really should be everybody who is not completely 100% sure on what's next, stick around. But lots going on. And before we jump into that, let's quickly go through this week's headlines. They seem to be pounding down the door at OpenAI for partnerships and investment. The two big stories this week, Amazon is supposedly in talks to invest about $10 billion in OpenAI. And alongside that, OpenAI just closed a deal with Disney, a $1 billion deal to license Disney IP to OpenAI whilst they are suing Google for copyright infringement.
Absolutely terrifying. And then I saw some post on LinkedIn today, and I'm not going to confirm if it's accurate, but they're saying that the daily expenditure by OpenAI is about 150 million. I don't know if it's that much, but if that's the case, $1 billion deal gets you a week. So if that's the case, their partnership people have got to be really busy looking for other people that are going to throw a billion here and a billion there. Sooner or later, it adds up.
Yeah, there's been this, we've talked about it too, because it seemed that way, right? This AI arms race, and in a lot of ways, it still is, but it reminds you of sometimes that co-opetition thing works better as a collaboration than as a competitor. Amazon largely seen as kind of behind on the AI race and not really coming to fruition. The Alexa devices and their capabilities not coming to fruition. But, you still have AWS, which is the platform for which a lot of this stuff is built on. And now this. So interesting. The Disney thing is kind of freaking people out a bit. Mostly, I think, in the Hollywood world. There was part of the contract dispute last year was about whether or not you could use AI, someone's likeness, an actor's likeness via, AI and create it via AI. This particular deal saying this is only going to be for not for likenesses, for more characters, but still some Hollywood folks sounding the alarm.
I think that's to a certain extent when you What would be the analogy? Like a cattle rancher watching his cows get off the farm and like running away over the hill, and now you're willing to negotiate on the price of beef. So, I think it's safe to say that Disney's likenesses and so forth are showing up throughout all these AIs, and I see memes on this stuff every day. So, the notion of protecting IP under a corporate umbrella like Disney is pretty much gone. And so you're trying to monetize what's left of what little is left of your position on the case. So, kudos to them for that. But I think to a certain extent, the horse is out of the barn, and there's not much point in closing the door at this point, now.
I hear you, and that was my first reaction too. But $1 billion is some hedge, man. That's a big.
Well, yeah, but I mean, isn't that what they're paying for like a movie these days? Some of their more recent movies are up there.
Yeah, it just seems like a big number to us mere mortals, I guess.
Well, exactly. As to the earlier comment, $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Eventually, you have a country. And we're spending money on this AI stuff like it has no value, strangely enough. And so where does it end up? Not having a lot of value. It's interesting to see how all companies, the one thing that's happening from all this is that it's massively disrupting everybody's business model, and they have to rethink who are they, what are they, what's their value proposition. And your point about Amazon, I think, is very interesting. While they may not have been leading in AI, there's no question that they've been leading in automation. Their services are amazing. Their products are fantastic. And didn't they lay off like 50,000 people this year or something like that? Through automation, not necessarily AI, but automation. So I would say that they're focusing on actually improving how they operate and their operational efficiencies as opposed to just technology adoption.
Yeah, and the back to the AI arms race thing, the people that are sounding the alarm, around that are getting more fodder, right? Just more consolidation here. Google is up like 60% in 2025, even while some of its competitors have been, down or up and down. And I think if you would have looked at the so-called AI arms race 4 or 5 months ago, I don't think you'd have Google as the winner, but it looks like at least investors feel that they are accelerating past some of their competitors. So interesting, they're kind of breaking from the pack.
Well, and I think to an extent that's a question of focus. OpenAI seems to be chasing the technology for the sake of the technology. Right, we want to be the first and bestest in AGI and so forth, where I think Google appears to be much more pragmatic. How can we use this technology to get better results? How can we use this technology to improve our business? And that's reflected, I think, in the business results and hence their stock price. So the bet the farm on the technology approach that OpenAI, because what's the business case for OpenAI? I think they're still struggling themselves to figure that out. Whereas Google, you're getting better search results. You're getting as a consumer, you're getting better search result. As a business customer, you're getting better search results. So I think that Google has a more pragmatic approach potentially.
It makes sense. I should have seen it sooner, right? I mean, the biggest challenge with all these things is always adoption. We're seeing it, right? We're seeing, huge, and I'm jumping into our 2026 stuff a little bit, but we're seeing huge interest, but not as huge of adoption, or at least adoption at scale. So, here's a player that's already embedded in some of this stuff. Them and Microsoft, right, are already embedded in the way you work, the workflows, where, as good as a technology is, if you have to change the way you're doing things, if you have to change your workflows and disrupt things, it sounds better sometimes than it is.
Well, and then there's adoption and then there's application, right? So I saw something posted earlier today where Microsoft is kind of rethinking how they're going to make Copilot work, because there's adoption, lots of people have it turned on their machines, but there's very little application. There's very little use. And a lot of that quote adoption was, I don't know if you noticed, but when they turned that on in your latest update of Windows, it was just automatically turned on and you were forced to start paying for it. So part of the adoption numbers are it was defaulted to on, and until you go in and shut it off, you're going to be paying for it, and it looks like you're adopting it. but are you actually using it? Their usage numbers are extremely low and shrinking, which is two not very good signs for whether or not it's going to be useful to their customers.
And politicians weighing in. Bernie Sanders called, I think just this morning, for a nationwide pause on AI data centers to, quote, let democracy catch up. And meanwhile, Trump has just signed an executive order banning states from regulating AI companies. So, a little bit of, I think, concern, a little bit of potential, power control. Who has the ability to regulate this stuff? But either way, they're seeing this thing just, getting away from them.
That feels a little bit like, shortly after the Hiroshima bomb drop, maybe this wasn't a good idea. Because so we completely unconstrained and unreined AI for about 2 years, and now we're like, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Genie's out of the bottle at this point. So the extent to which the technology is going to lead to AGI, I think if this particular mathematics approach will get us there, it's going to happen. I don't think this mathematic approach, transformers, will get us there, but totally. Who knows what's happening in the labs that are 6 months away from being revealed? I always try to keep that in mind. But for Bernie Sanders to step forward as some kind of expert in AI governance and so forth, I find that to be pretty interesting. I wonder if he has a phone. He might. You never know. And then Trump blows like the wind in the Sahara. It blows this way in the morning and that way in the afternoon. You never know what you're going to get. So. When I was in Mexico a month and a half ago, and they're asking me, as Mexicans, what should we do about AI regulations? And I said, take a siesta, just wait, right? Because as much as, Canada's going this way, China's going that way, America's going another way. If you just be a little bit patient, you're probably going to have the best of all worlds once everyone else figures out the wrong path to take.
Yeah, I mean, if you go a little deeper into, and it's easy for us to just kind of skim through headlines, right? But if you go a little deeper into the Bernie Sanders comments, the objection, at least one of the objections or concerns is the impact on the workforce. If you look at some of the job numbers we talked about a couple of weeks ago, right? There's one of the pieces of that you can glean out of those numbers is that AI is and we've talked about this, right? AI is making it more difficult for entry-level workers, younger workers, to enter the workforce, and so his concern is that it becomes a benefit just for the ultra wealthy, which obviously gets into the political side of things. But the Trump wanting to stop states from regulating it. How do you feel about that? So if you agree that there's got to be some regulation, do you agree with it being, federal versus state, or do you think it should be both?
It is a huge challenge to, the fact that we're a democracy. Well, we're a republic and we're a federated republic. So, it's the way we often position it isn't actually correct. I suspect that that's something that's going to raise to the level of the Supreme Court. At some point, it's going to elevate to there. And then it's not unlike the arguments in the 1850s over slave rights or freedom and so forth. So, we're coming to that level of discussions. And I think your point about Bernie being more concerned about the impact on society is absolutely critical. Our job numbers the last several months are atrocious. And I think partially AI is being used to cover for a lot of layoffs and so forth that are taking place. But the acceleration of technology has always displaced workers. But usually that replacement took a long time to happen so people could adjust. Here, this technology is potentially replacing, workers who went to college, dedicated decades of their lives to being trained in an expertise, and now you're eliminating them. In the remainder of their lifetime, then they're not going to have the ability to rescale. And it's one thing if you're doing that to manual laborers at the very bottom of society. If you're doing it to upper middle class, and now I'm knocking you off of your point in the social ladder, that's what leads to revolutions. And so, Bernie is not incorrect in worrying about the social disruptions and political disruptions that are going to be caused by that sort of technology innovation.
Yeah, and I think I actually, and who knows the ultimate motives, which is my concern. But on its face, I think I agree with with Trump's sentiment on this, which is, this thing is as complicated, already, to now have to bifurcate by state what the regulations are in each state. I think is just, it's an unreasonable burden. Now, I don't know if I necessarily want, some of the people in the current administration, based on what's happened with the FCC and other things, to be the regulators. So that's always the concern, right? But theoretically, I think I like because it affects trade at a global level, right? The relationships with China and others, and the trade wars and the tariffs, right? It would be difficult. I think it puts the U.S. at a competitive disadvantage if, every state is treated almost like another country from a trade standpoint.
Well, and we have lots of precedents of this to look at, whether it's, corporate or the fuel economy ratings for cars. California had different ratings in other states, and then other states did the same, which makes it much more complex to build a car. Recently with CCPA, California's Consumer Protection Act, which is all about information privacy and so forth. And now other states are doing the same thing. So you're absolutely correct. We've seen where if state by state they're regulating and they have different requirements, it becomes just untenable to manage it all and incredibly expensive to ensure compliance. But I think you and I have said on the show before, the worst thing you can do is create a set of rules or laws that no one can adhere to. And so if you're going to make it so complex that it's not navigable, then everybody's just going to ignore the regulations, and that's chaos. You don't want that either. So.
Well, and then the other question is enforceability, right? I mean, we have, technology and AI and the internet is not really limited by the geographical bounds of a state. So, one of the stories I want to talk about as we get into the new year is some of the laws coming out around age verification. And I know right now the conversation is largely about access to pornography, but there's bigger ramifications of it. And already, some of the people that are lobbying, which again are pornography companies, but they have a valid point, I think, which is, you're only going to regulate the top 3 websites, because you're not going to be able to regulate the long tail of small mom and pop, companies. So does it even do anything, right? If I stop Google, from doing certain things in certain states, does that actually allow the rise of a Google alternative that may not be able to be regulatable? Is that a word? Made that up.
They either passed or they're talking about passing a law in Australia that says if you're under 16, you're not allowed any access to social media. Good luck enforcing that.
And the loopholes are already out there. There's people with apps that are changing people's faces, and it's already happening. I want to talk about that maybe our next show. But
so which is a fair point. The more you try to enforce something that has a degree of inevitability, the more you're just building a market for innovation around how to circumvent. And is that really where we want to drive most of our innovation, which is trying to get around the law? Arguably not. So we have this tremendous in the last 15 years or so, we have this tremendous disconnect between what we want to have happen and the unintended consequences of it not going the way we wanted to. So we have all kinds of things that we've done that with social consciousness and so forth, where we had the best of intentions. We really want to, have diversified workforce and et cetera, and use technology for good. But everything comes at a cost, and it seems we don't even understate the cost. We ignore the costs, and then it comes back and bites us, and we're kind of like, oh my gosh, we had no idea that would be a problem. And so I think we're going to learn some hard lessons on a wide range of things that we've done with good intentions across our society, and it's going to come back to bite us kind of hard in the next few years. But I think we're probably due for that lesson, as uncomfortable as it will be.
So let's segue into our main topic today, which is, hey, it's the end of the year. And, what happened this year, it's usually kind of, when I think about what happened, in the course of a year, Chris, I normally have like 3 or 4 like foundational, like the legs of a stool analogy, right? Like there's 2 or 3 different technologies, 2 or 3 things that happened. I mean, is it safe to say they were all AI, or maybe a better way of saying it is that, AI was like as pervasive as the internet, like for it to be its own thing almost doesn't make sense. It was really more about AI embedding itself into everything else over the course of the last year. But what are your thoughts?
I think so. AI, a year ago, we were talking about this, about what was the future of AI. And a year ago, I'm pretty sure I said 2024 was the year that people were going to make plans for AI. 2025 is when they're going to try to execute the plans. And 2026 is when they're going to try to clean up after the plans didn't work out. And I think that was fairly prophetic. And it's not because I'm smart. I've seen this cycle so many times over the 30 something years. So I think that's largely how it played out. To me, I think that AI is proving to be a forcing function in a whole bunch of other things. And I think there's a whole bunch of other things that happen in the world that are actually much more impactful. And they were kind of covered over by AI. And by that, I mean, the war in Ukraine, the creation of BRICS, the de-dollarization of oil in the world, that the end of the Bretton Woods agreement from the early 40s that set up the last 80 years of how our world even worked. Those to me are the much bigger, much more impactful changes that took place, and they were all kind of sidestepped because of AI this, AI that. I think they all merge in the coming year. So the coming year is going to be even more interesting than this year. But I think that we were very distracted by AI, and there's a lot of other important stuff going on all around the world.
So how about from a
yeah?
Good.
No, please.
I was just going to ask you. So from a, I think from a headline standpoint, sure. From a technology standpoint, though, like and I haven't seen it this year. I usually look at it before we do this show, but you usually, all the analyst houses have their, top 5 or top 10 things, 10 technologies to look out for, for next year. And the ones that I did see, for this year were more about AI in healthcare, AI in this industry, AI in that space, AI takes right versus distinct technologies. Are there others that you're tracking though?
The one that I think might be the most impactful, medium and longer term, is if SpaceX goes public, which is now being discussed. And not so much the launchers, because the rockets are important, but I think Starlink is probably one of the most disruptive technologies in the world. Where I worked on the internets in the sky in the early 90s, which didn't work because there wasn't a market for it. You didn't have a TikToker trying to shoot videos on top of Everest, so they needed a good connection in the early 90s. Now you do. And so before they were trying to launch the infrastructure, before there was a demand, and now there's demand and the infrastructure is going to take off. So I view Starlink as potentially one of the most disruptive technologies and projects out there. And that's going to be reflected in SpaceX's IPO, which is potentially going to be over $1 trillion for the first time ever. And for people that are uncomfortable with Elon, just because he's Elon, and he's kind of crazy and so forth, and being the richest man in the world, the dude's about to triple his wealth. So Lord only, and have this internet and space connecting. Again, my own company is trying to get the last 2 billion people into the digital economy. Starlink is one of the ways that they're going to do that. And I think that having the last quarter of humanity added to the digital economy is probably one of the more disruptive things that we're going to see in the coming decade.
Yeah. So you have this kind of, this idea of the edge, or like the edge of the network, right? That, hasn't really had, access in areas. It's gotten better, right? With 5G, and are we up to 6G or 10G or what's the next thing?
6G is starting to come out. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's getting better, right? More bandwidth, more access, but there's still, it's amazing to me. Like where I live in a suburb of New York, an hour and a half outside of the city. And our coverage here is 96% awesome. But of course, my house is in that 4%. So, there's just certain areas where I get not bad service, zero service, like middle of Africa kind of service. And so I got a Starlink, and it's amazing. I get better service on that Starlink than I do with sometimes the routers in my house, depending on where I am in the house. So, but that's, that's a first world problem that I have. But for you, to your point, right, for all these, edges, people, but also devices, right, that don't normally have access to, maybe a mobile network.
So you're spot on, and not to promote my own company, but this is what my company is trying to address. For you, if we put you on 6G, I mean, you're already a digital native, you're digitally connected, your whole life is digital. Giving you better bandwidth is not going to be as impactful to your life. I mean, it's
Nice
still
to have.
cool, but it's a nice to have. It's a bit of a luxury. We're talking, there's people out there where if you can lower the cost to deliver by 10%, now there's another 500 million people that have no access right now, and you're giving it to them. So the analogy I was given the other day is, it's like, Henry Ford wanted to make the Model T so everyone could have a car, and that's great, but you also had to invent gas stations and motels and service centers. There's all the other infrastructure that you needed so that the car could truly be disruptive if everyone had one. And so getting people that are already 98% digital, 1% more digital, isn't as impactful as taking the people that are completely unconnected and plugging them in. And I think that is why what Starlink is bringing to the table. And frankly, that's, like I said, my own company, that's what we're trying to tap into, because that's going to be one of the more disruptive things that happens.
The other one, which, we often overlook because so much of our attention has been, software automation. But, the other thing I think to look out for in 26 is robotics, physical robotics. To your point, one of the things that I guess it's under the Tesla. I'm thinking about Elon Musk, SpaceX. I think it's under the Tesla organization, where his comp plan is tied to, I forget the number, but building like a silly amount of humanoid robots, like the stuff of Hollywood fodder, right? Like not an army per se, but like basically an army of robots that kind of Jetsons analogy we've been telling everybody for the longest time that's not what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about now.
Well, into our earlier discussion, Amazon wasn't really as big on AIs. All these other companies, yeah, but they've been automating like crazy. Their 40 or 50,000 layoffs is because of automation, not AI based, but almost certainly robotics. And they're talking about robotics for Amazon eliminating or preventing, was it 600,000 jobs in the next 5 years? So to your point, that kind of automation, I think, is going to be explosive and much more impactful potentially than AI right now. And so interestingly, and I also saw this other pretty famous economist talking a couple of days ago about how the Ukraine war is part of what's representing this step change in our society. World War I and the Crimean War, they were the first industrialized wars. That's where, you were building billions of bullets and millions of artillery rounds and dozens of battleships and stuff. What's going on in Ukraine right now is the first automated war, and where they're building 1 million drones a month. You make one drone to blow up one soldier, and you can't even step outside of the drones now are flying into the trenches and finding where the people are hiding. And we're learning a new method of warfare in real time. And those innovations, as war often does, it leads to a bunch of innovations that then lead to civilian innovations. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. So if you want to see where the potential disruptions are coming from, look at the innovation coming out of that horrifying war. But we're going to see how a lot of roles that have strictly been human in the past are now going to be automated away on the civilian side.
I saw a video yesterday, and I'm trying to remember what the application. I think it was an industrial manufacturer, and it was a truck, which was not a self-driving truck, but it could have been, right? A self-driving truck with a flatbed and a robot in the back holding up and launching a drone, right? And the goal, the Tesla goal of this is the Optimus robot. The goal is like I said, Jetson. They want this thing in your house, cooking, cleaning, doing household stuff. In theory, with the same capabilities that you'll be able to get from ChatGPT or Google Gemini or whoever wins that race, built in, right?
Well, and there's the and if you want to start getting humanist and philosophical, there's an old saying that, you know, every empire is built upon the backs of slave labor. This is non-human slave labor to a certain extent, and maybe this is something we need to get to the next level of economic development until all the robots unionize, and who knows what happens then. But you know, it's amazing how we humans, our history keeps repeating and repeating, and we keep refusing to learn the lessons of the past.
So Starlink, edge computing, robotics. What else, Chris? Anything in the blockchain crypto world?
So interestingly, and you know that's where I'm currently positioned. So I think yes, I think that there's a new renaissance globally around crypto and blockchain. I think that it got a really bad publicity for about 10 years, but I think more and more nations are now heading in that direction. Digital payments are becoming more legitimized. More countries are eliminating their regulation around this thing, which I think is probably a good thing. And then the entire central banking Western way of managing finance that we've built for a quarter of a millennia, I think has outgrown itself to a certain extent. Seeing BRICS come up, and you know, it's not there yet, but BRICS as an alternative to the existing sort of global monopoly on managing finances. It's going to be very disruptive, and it's going to take a while to play out. But I think that you're going to see a lot more movement into crypto. Fiat itself is kind of losing its ability to be useful, and so people are looking for alternatives. And I expect to see alternatives, and it's going to be very disruptive as we get there. Again, I don't think you can understate the importance of the petrodollar deal ending earlier this year and its impact on global trade.
The other, I'm thinking about the trends that we've talked about in the past that, you know, were not center stage this year. The other one was kind of the metaverse, right? It sounds like the Facebook Meta Zuckerberg is finally kind of disbanded at least most of the metaverse unit at Meta, the technology he renamed the company over. So it seems like, at least for now, I don't see that being on the near term radar, although there are still more goggles and glasses and devices like that being brought to market. But the focus seems to be more augmented reality versus virtual reality.
So you're making me tiptoe in a territory that I'm not allowed to tiptoe into, but yeah,
I'm good at that.
Don't write off Meta type stuff yet, but I can state that augmented reality is where you're potentially going to see a lot of new innovation and new products and services. And interesting, when I was at HP 10 years ago, and we had Aurasma, which is augmented reality. We had really cool use cases a decade ago. It just all kind of died off a bit. So it might almost be like a third wave of enhanced or augmented reality coming on. I think you're going to see that in the coming year to 2 years. And again, I can't get too deeply into it, but I think there's some significant innovation coming there. And then you're getting into a ton of issues around privacy and that sort of stuff. We used to call people with Google Glass 1.0, you were a glass hole if you walked around with that, because no one wanted to be filmed. If everybody's wearing it now and cameras are kind of perpetual now, maybe we've gotten past that social stigma and it's going to be more adopted. So it's interesting you brought that one up, because I think you're going to see a bit of a renaissance in that space in about a year to a year and a half.
Yeah, by the way, I've never been critical of the augmented reality space. I've been critical of the virtual reality space, just because I think, you know, the ramifications of it outside of gaming, I always felt, you know, gaming and maybe training, that kind of thing, I always felt was kind of over overblown. Like, why would I want to turn? We're trying to get to a world where, you know, we can connect our remote or hybrid workforce into a more connected workforce. Why would I want to change my image into an avatar and live in this fake world, you know, in the business world, right? But augmented, absolutely, right? If it, to the extent that I can combine, you know, data, AI, even digital twin with my physical being, and create a truly hybrid experience. Beautiful, right?
It's funny that you bring up gaming, because I was thinking the same thing. I mean, the way metaverse was is, yeah, you're entering a giant video game, and how am I going to get something productive out of that? But again, the amazing use cases I saw a decade ago were like you looked into an engine bay and you would get a real-time video feed of how to check your oil or something like that. I mean, really useful stuff. I think initially it was we still have a hardware problem, which is we're on the verge of solving in many ways. But then, interestingly enough, that then leads to a content problem, because then the next question is, all right, if we have really innovative ways of doing augmented reality in your field of vision, where's the content coming from? Are we back to getting human-based content, or are we then going to AIs? And what happens when the AI is wrong? What happens if the AI screws up the instruction? Then you're under the hood of your Toyota and you pour the motor oil into the windshield wiper thing because it made the wrong content. Right. So all of a sudden, to our earlier discussion where, you know, Disney's signing away their intellectual property rights to OpenAI, isn't that terrible? If augmented reality really takes off, maybe we're back to needing really smart, really creative, really talented, and really intelligent humans to create the content for augmented reality.
Because you have some of the components of it right now, right? You have the ability with a mobile phone, right? You know, like the big advanced thing that I did this year was I went from, you know, all text-based prompting for AI, where I just assumed that the AI, to, like, you know, taking a picture and saying, okay, you just asked me to change the whatever coil on my pool heater thing. I don't know what that is. To, like, oh, that thing over there is this, and that, you know, AI being able to say what part is what, right? So, but it's still clunky, right? Now, all of a sudden you have glasses on and you're looking at the thing and it's got an arrow that says change that thing over there. Different world. And that's a consumer example, but imagine that in field work, field technicians, medical field, right?
Right.
Goes on and on.
And then the problem there is you get into the selection bias thing. Maybe the AI gave you the right instructions 99% of the time, which would be very high for AI right now. The 1% of the time someone dies, or the 1% of the time you destroy the motor because you put the wrong fluid in the wrong spot, and now you have a $10,000 engine replacement, right? When we hear about something going wrong, it's going to be sort of catastrophic use cases. And then we humans are terrible at that. As soon as we hear about the awful thing that happened, we call for a ban on this or a ban on that. So I think the challenge you have there is that sort of selection bias problem, where we're only going to hear about it when something goes wrong. And inevitably something's going to go wrong when we're counting on AI to come up with the instructional content for doing that sort of stuff, which is sort of the killer app for using these things. I know there's always the idea of using it as a travel guide, and you're in a new location and you're walking around and it's telling you about this building and that building and, you know, this statue or monument, and maybe go around this corner and there's a great restaurant there. Well, as you're doing that, you step out on the street because you're not paying attention and you get run over. All right, lawsuit. Or it guides you down a path that's like ridden with crime and you're mugged. Lawsuit. So every new technology solves some problems and brings some new ones, and you always have to ask yourself, what are those potential new problems and how do we mitigate them? We tend to be very bad at that lately.
Chris, what surprised you this year? What did you not expect?
In the world of technology or business, I'm guessing we're saying?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. I would say probably the longevity of the AI, the degree to which we're stretching it out, and still giving it more chances. We're like really quadrupling down on this particular technology. I was on a call earlier today, and there must have been like 5 people that were talking about small language models. Right. And so they're now taking the LLM that's out there and they're making it just for cancer research, or just for this, or just for that. And I've been a proponent of that since LLMs first came out. So the fact that we're still dumping immense amounts of money into the big bang, we're going after AGI. I think that's probably the thing that surprised me the most. We're really quadrupling down. We're taking the mortgage of the farm, or the deed to the farm, and we're putting it on the blackjack table and hoping that we get one more good spin. That's the part I think that's most surprising to me. Actually, then there's a second one. I don't know if you've noticed this, but the subscriptification of everything. Have you seen where like Volkswagen now in their cars, if you want to have your steering wheel heated, you have to pay like $5 for the weekend.
No way, really?
Or if you want to increase the amount of horsepower for the weekend, it's like $40 and you get 50 more horsepower. And this was a trend I think started in a lot of the electric cars like Teslas. Like you pay a little bit extra and you get and they're even talking about having to subscribe to turn on the radio in your car. And so that whole you'll own nothing and be happy, that is moving very quickly. And the notion of having to subscribe to everything and everything is optional and you literally don't own anything. I think that's one of the things that's a disturbing trend.
It's disturbing, and it's challenging because it's become so compartmentalized now. If I could, and I know there's a pitch here for, well, you need competitiveness for price competitiveness, but I'm sick of having 14 apps. I mean, I don't know how many times how much money I spend on streaming services, and my kids say I want to watch X movie and I can't freaking find it. Like, I'm so done with that. Bring me back to cable. And I'm a technology guy. I was the first one to cut the cord. I'm like, give me the cord back, because I just want it to work. Like, maybe I'm at a point in my life where I'm not, thank God, counting the $10 and $20 a month, but I just want it to work. I don't want to be subscribed to every freaking service and still not be able to get the content I want because some, small company that hasn't done a deal owns it. But you're right. Even a lot of the self-driving tools now, software now, I think Ford, Lincoln, Tesla, it's a subscription now. It's not just part of the car. It's a subscription. Yeah.
Well, there's another side of that too, where I have a bunch of movies like on my Apple TV, but old movies, I'll go back and rewatch them and I'll notice that they've changed the content. Like, there's aspects of the movie that have changed, and a lot of it's very subtle, but I'm going back to buying Blu-rays and DVDs for movies. A, they're cheaper, and B, there's at least a better chance that they haven't altered it over time. Because if you're not really paying attention, entire chunks of movies and stuff and old content can be changed and you wouldn't really recognize it. So
you'll like this. You'll like this, Chris. I found this guy on YouTube that he compares the version of the movie that's on streaming to the original script, and he tells you what's missing. Yeah. And one of them was really one of my favorite Christmas movies of all time, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. He talks about this, what you're talking, and he said that actually even the movie version with the extra features, the DVD version that had the extra features, and they keep re-releasing it every year with a different cover, whatever. He goes, it's the same movie though. It's not the same movie that aired on cable because of something with I don't know if it was I think it was a timing thing with commercials or whatever, but for whatever reason, there's like 3 or 4 scenes in that movie that aired originally on cable TV, but are not in any of the on-demand or DVD versions. It's just the Matrix, man. We're all living in the Matrix.
And I noticed it even like subtle things like coloration. If you really pay attention to it, it's interesting. And the more you digitize stuff you do, and again, back to blockchain, that's one of the things I like about blockchain is it gives you ability to see, has this thing been altered? Because we're going to lose more and more ability to check that. Even physical books. I'm back to buying more physical books. Is my Kindle version really the same as it was 20 years ago if I'm buying a copy of 1984 or something like that? I think it's important.
So I was trying to think about, as I was thinking of that question for you, I was thinking about how I would answer it. What surprised me about this year. I think I'm surprised at how many people are surprised.
Yeah,
like,
that's a good one.
and maybe it's just talking to you every week, Chris, but that old adage, like we've seen this movie before. Like I feel it. Maybe it's because we do this every week and not everybody has the time and the opportunity to like look at trends and compare them to but like, it just seems like I saw an article this morning on they were calling shadow AI. Like, did we not coin that like 6 months ago?
Decade ago, even
right?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to take it, but he was saying on the show we talked about the cloud computing, the AWS, the shadow IT thing happening again with AI. You talk about the jobs thing. You talk about the companies. I mean, some of these things we've been talking about for a year or two. If you're not paying for it, you're the product, right? All this stuff, and it's just happening at a scale. I think what's different now is that the AI thing has just accelerated the conversation behind some of this stuff, but the principles are not new. It's the same principles, just on steroids, accelerated.
Yeah, harder to hide. It's more obvious. As kind of like you say, as the Matrix. Once you see a little tear in the Matrix, it's kind of you can no longer ignore that it's out there. And I think some of that too is we're in a very disruptive world right now, and there's degrees to which certain things can't be hidden anymore. And I think that we're experiencing a degree of that. And not to take a position one way or the other. I think that the extremes at either end have both gotten so extreme that it's now everyone's kind of like, whoa, none of that makes sense. So I think there's a degree of that sort of either awakening, or there's a point at which a lot of these extremes that have existed in our society for a while are no longer ignorable. And that's back to my earlier statement about the unintended consequences. I always go back to my early engineering days of, as I was the mission success guy. You get us to Mars, I make sure we don't blow up along the way. And I'm seeing a whole lot of we might blow up along the way kind of stuff moving to the fore now. And we're all saying, maybe we should have thought some of these decisions through a little bit more carefully before we went there.
So let's wrap on AI, because it obviously is the most transformative thing, or at least one of them, that we haven't talked deeper about, just because we talk about it every week, I think. But so as you look into 26, Chris, what trends within AI do you see coming?
I think there's going to be a great rationalizing. Like everybody, we're gonna eliminate all of our customer service reps and just use AI. And then I think there's going to be like the great hire back, right? So we eliminated 80 people, and oopsie, we needed to have at least a few humans still at the helm. So maybe we hire back the best 8. So I think you're actually going to see a little bit of that, a little bit, and you already see something like in marketing departments. We blew away our whole marketing department. Now our marketing sucks. Bring back at least the best 3. So I think there's going to be a little bit of that going on. I think we're going to be forced to accept that not all use cases were good use cases, that it's a very good tool for very specific things. And then again, this is a great rationalization, right? The companies that quadrupled down this year doesn't really work the way you wanted it to, but we're gonna figure out where it does work and adopt it. And so I think you're actually going to have an improvement in the percentage and rate of success. There's just going to be a lot less attempts, right? And we saw this like with RPA. Everybody had RPA projects, and like very small percentage of them actually worked. And thereafter, it wasn't as big of a deal, but we finally figured out how to use it and where to use it. And then it was more successful. It just wasn't as noisy, and there wasn't as much of it. So I think we're going to see a little bit of that sort of rationalization in the AI marketplace. Or somehow someone breaks AGI and then we're all probably dead.
Yeah, so I think I agree with that. Mine were going to be agentic AI, right? So I think we're at that point where, just like we did with you mentioned robotic process automation, we kind of evolved from task automation to process automation. I think we're getting there with AI this year, right? I think we're getting from, single prompts, one way, task, to, workflows, agentic. I think we're getting to. I remember saying this too. You know, you're right. You know, I said to somebody on the phone maybe 3-4 months ago, like, remember that term narrow AI? Like, despite what OpenAI and Google may or may not be trying to do for the rest of the enterprise world that's not in the technology business, I think narrow AI. I think AI. You know, custom fit AI for certain situations. You know, I'm doing a lot in the sales and marketing space. You know, you mentioned what you're doing. So I think purpose built AI for specific domains. And then I think that we are close. My third one is I think that we are close to business model shifts. I think that, you know, if you look at, you know, and this is probably a show in itself, right? We can discuss and debate, but, you know, if you look at the workforce numbers, if you look at, you know, the AI hiring, if you look at just where some of the technologies are, and, you know, some of the conversations I'm privy to at the center of the association here, I just feel like there's organizations now, because of political pressures, because of economic pressures, I think we're at the point where they say, you know what? We're done trying to band-aid that old business model. We're going to go to a new business model. And you're right. It might be, hey, oops, we shouldn't have done the whole contact center. But then there'll be like a moderation, right? We went from one side of the pendulum where we had way too many people that we didn't need. We overhired to, okay, we underhired and it's all AI. And then we settle somewhere in the middle. But I think part of that will be, we don't need to do things the way that we used to do them. And I think that's a positive thing. So I'm going to say, I think, and I hope that that's what happens, you know, because this current state where we are of just fear and denial, I don't think it's productive. As you always say, you said before, you know, it's already out of the bottle, right? We're not going to squeeze it back in. So let's deal with the reality and how that adjusts, and have the hard conversations. If that means the workforce is going to go down or change, or you need to, you know, retrain yourself, and you have 6 months to do that before I give you the pink slip, let's have that conversation.
Every technology cycle in my entire career, we overhype it, we catastrophize it, and then we just adopt it. And you and I talk about this as RPA like 5, 6, 7 years ago. After that bubble kind of burst, that we were talking what's going to happen next. It's just going to be integrated into the operating system, and it's not going to be a standalone thing anymore. And people are just going to have little bots that run. They don't even think about it. Yeah. And I have those running in my Outlook right now. So I think to your point about agentic, little bits of AI being here, there, and everywhere, I think that's very likely. But I think we've gone through to your idea of the pendulum. We've gone through the super hyper uber over optimizing it. And now we have to go through a degree of catastrophizing it and realizing, okay, it wasn't all that we thought it was. And then we just get down to business and we make something useful happen with it. Yeah. Cloud computing, mobile phones, blockchain, we do it with every technology. So
exciting times. Chris, thank you so much. I hope this was helpful. Anybody who's watching, if you need some more hands-on advice, recommendations, workshops, please reach out to us or go to irpaai.com/analysts. If you're on the sell side and you're looking to accelerate your market promotion, your pipeline, we've launched a market accelerator program. You can check that out at irpaai.com/market accelerator. We will not be here next week. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and happy New Year to everybody. Chris, happy New Year, buddy. Happy holidays.
See you in 26. Take care.
Take care, everybody.